Welcome to the Opportunity Podcast, where entrepreneurs come to learn from real buyers, sellers, and industry experts on the lesser-known growth opportunities to build their online business empires. We'll uncover tactics veteran online business entrepreneurs have used to build, buy, flip, and sell their way towards personal wealth. Sit back, grab a coffee, and get ready to uncover hidden growth secrets. The Opportunity Podcast starts now.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Opportunity Podcast, your go-to resource for hidden growth opportunities throughout online business. For those familiar new to the podcast, I'm Sarah, and thanks for joining me today. In this episode, I'll be talking to Ian Barnard, an experienced marketing strategist and the strategy director at Creative Business Company, a marketing agency that helps businesses accelerate growth through the power of brand marketing. Ian gives us a step-by-step guide on how to build a big brand on a small marketing budget. He breaks down the advantages that big brands have over small businesses when it comes to brand building and the clever techniques that small businesses can use to outsmart the competition and claw back their market share. We also discuss the effectiveness of performance-based ads, the worst metric to base a social media advertising campaign on, and the changes Ian predicts will take place in the marketing industry in the coming years. If you want to learn how to mimic big brand advertising at a fraction of the cost, then this is the conversation for you. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Opportunity Podcast. I'm really excited to be joined by today's guest. We've got Ian Barnard on the show with us today. So Ian, thank you so much for coming on, and how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, thanks. How are you?
Doing awesome. So where are you calling in from in the world right now?
I am in Burlington, which is a small town just outside of Toronto in Canada.
Awesome. Okay, so you're not experiencing like the massive heat wave that most of the world is going through right now, are you?
No, well, it's like hot, but only hot for Canada. It's like
Okay.
supposed to be 25 degrees, and for us, that's like, woo, shorts weather.
Oh man, 25 sounds super lovely right now. I think most people back home in the States that I've been keeping up with, it's pretty brutal there. So I'll take Canada hot any day. Well, awesome. So, we were just chatting a little bit offline, and I think we're going to get into some really interesting topics today. Before we get lost in some of those things, I want to just back up and get an introduction of you. So for those who don't know you, can you walk us through your marketing journey and what you're up to today?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the strategy director at the Creative Business Company. We call ourselves a performance brand agency, and we're based in Toronto, Canada. And we specialize in helping challenger brands grow through the power of brand marketing. And it was, I guess for me personally, it was a fairly long and winding road to get here. I actually started off my career in the civil engineering industry, which was a huge mistake. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. Ended up doing civil inspections around Canada in my 20s. Really didn't enjoy it. Went back to university, studied political science, and then lucked into a marketing internship in my last year. And after I graduated, luckily they offered me a job. And that's how I got my start in marketing. I worked in nonprofits for a while, made the jump to e-commerce, and ran the e-commerce store for a national footwear brand, Cougar Shoes, here in Canada. And about a year ago, I made the jump agency side, and now I get to work with brands from all over the world on marketing strategy and brand management.
That's a very cool. Your trajectory sounds an awful lot like so many guests on this show. It seems like everyone who kind of finds themselves in around the marketing or online business sphere have kind of dipped their toes into like just about every industry before they land in the online space, which I think is a great thing because it sounds like everything that you have been involved in, I'm sure helps you in what you offer to your clients today. It is one thing I wanted to get into because you're talking to, you've already worked for a fairly large e-com brand and now you're helping businesses of different sizes. One thing in reviewing your materials, it seems like you've spelled out for businesses kind of what they should be looking for in the marketing strategy based on their own business size and kind of what the differences are between, say, what big brands have available to them versus what small brands have available to them when it comes to brand building. So I was wondering if you could just kind of walk me through that. What would you say are the main advantages that, say, these bigger brands have out there that, maybe smaller businesses don't quite have available to them when it comes to their marketing strategy?
Well, the main advantage that big brands have is that they have a massive pile of cash. I know that sounds kind of like obvious and dumb, but there's a huge implication for that because they can turn this huge pile of cash they have into advertising. And what that means is that they can reach more people more frequently and more persuasively than most smaller brands and businesses can because they just basically have the money to spend. And I think one of the key insights that big brands have, perhaps smaller brands aren't fully aware of, is that most of your business is going to come from future customers. So, what does that mean? That sounds kind of philosophical and a bit weird. In any category, you're always going to have a number of people who are actively shopping. So, whatever you're selling, whether it's toothpaste or shoes or insurance, there's always a small number of people who are actively looking for those products or services at any given time. So we call these in-market customers or current demand. Big brands know that they absolutely have to go and chase the current demand, right? So these are people who are actively shopping, they're ready to pay for something. We want them to be our customer. Where they get the extra boost up or the extra leg up in the game is that they also go after future customers. So while there's a small pool of people who are actively shopping, there's a much larger pool of people who will shop at some point. They will be ready to purchase at some point over the next, whatever, 6, 12, 18 months, but they're not ready to do it yet. And the big implication in that is that you need different types of marketing to reach future customers versus current customers. So there's a really great study published recently by the Aaron McBass Institute and the B2B Institute, which is run by LinkedIn, which found that 95% of a company's customers are not in the market. So another way of saying that is that only 5% of all the customers that a business is going to have over its lifetime are actively shopping for goods and services at any given time. So big brands are going after future customers and they're going after current customers because they have the money to do so. They have the money to run these big brand campaigns and they have the money to run these more performance marketing campaigns. Small brands obviously don't have the same amount of money and they often get stuck just going after the people who are in market.
What's super interesting about what you just said is like, I'm wondering how you overcome that. It's like, if you're, say a smallish business listening to this, and you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea this is what my pool looked like. How can you go after those current and future customers even with a limited budget? And you're going up against the bigger fish.
Yeah, it's a great question. You have to work a lot harder, basically. So you know that you can't outspend the big guys. So what you have to do instead is you have to take a different approach to marketing than the big brands. You can't copy what they're doing. And you also have to make sure that your advertising and your marketing works harder. We actually know how much harder it has to work. You have to work 3.5 times as hard.
Wow.
So if there's a big brand and a small brand and you give them both the same marketing budget, you give $1 million to a big brand, you give $1 million to a small brand, and they both run the same advertising campaigns in the market, the big brand will still get 3.5 times better results than the small brand just because they're big, just because more people know who they are, they're more familiar with them, and they have a larger pool of customers. So it's really unfair. So if you're a small brand, I think the biggest mistake that small brands make is that they usually double down on performance marketing or digital marketing, let's call it, which on the surface is the rational thing to do, right? If you're saying, fine, I don't have the budget to do things like TV and out of home and do these big splashy big campaigns. So instead, I'm going to take what I can afford, which is Google and Facebook, TikTok, all the other digital platforms that are out there. I'm going to advertise there instead. And you can often get really good results in the early days by doing this because you're tapping into all the existing demand that's in the category, right? The way that performance marketing works is that it's targeted to people who are actively shopping. So in order to show an ad to someone has to declare an interest publicly in order to see an ad on the internet, right? So if I'm on Google, I need to be typing in where can I buy insurance? Or I'm browsing, clothing stores online and looking at shoes and t-shirts and so on. So performance marketing is really, really good at identifying people who are in market, who are ready to buy something, and then showing an ad to them, which is great. We obviously want to get those customers. What it can't do, though, is target or show ads to people who aren't displaying any interest, which, as we know, is 95% of your total customers. So only focusing on performance campaigns is a really big mistake, even though it seems like a smart and rational thing to do. And the way that you overcome that is you have to run a different type of campaign on social. So we know that we can't afford TV. However, what we can do is deliver a TV-like campaign using low-cost digital platforms.
That's super interesting. Yeah, I never really thought about that, or maybe just had someone who talked about that future problem of this is what I can do in the moment. And I feel like I'm tapping into the pool. I feel like I'm tapping into the potential, only to really not be accessing the people that I want to be accessing. Most people don't realize it. I think, like you said, they're turning the wheels, getting on social, things they can afford, thinking they're doing everything they can do, only to find out, well, it's not quite solving the problem that you need, especially problem that you have, especially as a smaller business. I feel like some of the solutions you just were hinting at, it might relate to my next question. So I'll kick this one off. You have sort of coined this 245 digital media framework. What does that mean? And maybe how does that relate to some of the challenges we were just talking about?
Yeah, so I can't claim full credit for the 245 digital media framework. I originally came across the idea from a company in the UK. So there's an agency called Born Social, and they released a white paper called Brand Building on Social Media, I think. And they came up with this idea that the way that brands and companies are using social media to build their brand is wrong. And the report goes into a lot of detail on why it's wrong, and they have some great data to back it all up. But long story short, what they're saying is that if you want to build your brand, if you want to try and reach and speak to future customers effectively, you can't take a performance ad mindset. So if someone isn't ready to buy, they're not going to be enticed by a sale or a free offer or subscribing something. Like, it's not going to work, right? Like, if I'm not currently shopping for insurance or I don't currently need a new phone, then offering me 20% off a phone if I click now or subscribe or download a white paper or something isn't going to do anything for me. So what you have to do is take more of an old fashioned or a more traditional mindset and say, look, what can we say to this person so that A, sort of see our ad and recognize it, and then remember us down the road when they are ready to buy. So if you think back to sort of like 80s, 90s, early 2000s, when you had all these, television campaigns, that was really the goal there. The goal was not to make you run out to the store and buy something immediately after you saw an ad for it. It's just to kind of get stuck in your head, introduce you to the brand, make you familiar with who they are and what they do, and then the next time that you're out in the store or you're ready to buy something, maybe, a couple weeks or a couple months later, you're slightly more inclined to go with them because, you saw and that was maybe funny, entertaining, interesting, or relevant to you. So you have to take that kind of approach when you're building a brand. Obviously not delivering it on TV and print and out of home, but use these low cost digital channels to get that kind of messaging out there.
Yeah, that stuck in your head concept. I'm sure that's something that so many brands they're fighting for. They wish they had nowadays. I can just say, as you were saying that, I have no idea why, but you were saying, back in like the 90s, 2000s, like ads they had a different motive. The motive is to get stuck in your head and kind of be there for later. And I have no idea why, but some theme song from some commercial I heard as like a kid came up. And then I realized I could sing the whole theme song still. And it was for like for some dog product like Canine Advantix or something like that, like flea medicine. And I was like,
Hmm.
why do I still like it's been a while since I've seen that. I mean, yet here it is still later. That'd be some nurturing if I somehow get a dog at some point and I go back and buy that product simply because I can still remember the tune from the commercial. But there's something to be said about the power of that long-term nurturing and just kind of a different way of getting in customers' heads that I don't know. It seems like it's shifted today. There's the desire is there, but the ability to do so, maybe not so much. I guess maybe people are also slacking on really good, catchy jingles for commercials nowadays. But yeah, I mean, that perspective, it's interesting. I'd imagine as a brand, though, listening to this, it's like, oof, okay. I'm hearing that there's a lot of things that I could be doing wrong. I still want that effect. I still want that lasting effect. And I want to get in front of people. That's something I wanted to talk to you about because everyone's got a different perspective of what makes a campaign convert. And I was curious if you have like an approach to, say, storytelling when it comes to building strong campaigns. And do you have any advice for those who maybe want to tell their story in a way that's effective, but maybe even still authentic?
Yeah, and that's the challenge, right? So if you can't get someone to buy something today and you're trying to get them to buy something in the future, what are you supposed to say to them, right? So that's the real challenge when it comes to brand advertising. I think it comes back to positioning. So in marketing, when we talk about positioning, positioning is really how you talk about your brand within the context of the market in a way that makes you unique or different. So I think that you need to have a really good, strong positioning for the brand, which then you can kind of tie back to your brand campaign messages. So your brand campaign does need to be related to the product in some way, but it also needs to be entertaining, basically. You know, brand advertising has a really bad reputation because I think people see it as a bit fluffy, these kind of very emotionally charged videos. They're either trying to be very inspiring, like really sad and like tug the heartstrings. You think of like Nike does a lot of commercials where it's like, you know, people running to very inspirational music and it's all these kind of motivational quotes going across the screen. I don't think that works all that well. I think what we need to do is, again, go back to the golden age of advertising in the 80s and the 90s, where brands were able to tell their story in an interesting way that was entertaining first and then kind of informational second. And it needs to be more entertaining because that's how it's going to get stuck in someone's mind. That's how you create viral content. You want to make something that makes people feel something and then want to share it with somebody else. And to do that, you really have to tell a bit of a story. You can't be kind of too focused on the product with rational facts and reasons to buy because people aren't ready to buy yet. And you can't get your head too far in the clouds when it comes to, you know, lofty purposes and, you know, higher goals. So there's a balance in the middle where you can find interesting and funny things to say about your product that will hopefully stick in the customer's mind and make them think of you first when they are ready to buy.
When you say all that, it makes me think about the current environment and the way people operate today. I'm kind of jumping ahead here a little bit, but this just came to my mind as you're talking about it. It's like, okay, the goal is to create something entertaining and to stick into people's mind. But how do you do that when collectively there's decreasing attention spans? And how has navigating those shortening attention spans really had an effect on the way businesses can approach marketing or, do something that's entertaining or valuable?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if we really do have shortened attention spans. I know that you hear that a lot, but at the same time, people still binge Netflix. I mean, I certainly do. Like, I'll binge watch something on Netflix if I like it. If I'm reading a good book, I won't put it down until it's done. I don't know if the problem is shortened attention span. I think it's just the quality of advertising that we're putting out is just getting worse. Like, it's just not as good. It's not as entertaining as it used to be. So if something is boring or annoying, then of course, like, people aren't going to have much time for it and they're going to try and ignore it or block it out wherever they can.
Yeah, when you say that, it's interesting perspective. Because I was just thinking about some, I don't know, maybe it was like an account on Instagram or something the other day, and it was like a meme or something, and it was just talking about somebody taking a deep dive onto some store's website for like 2 hours and not even realizing they were doing it. And it's like, well, clearly, if a store was good enough at what they're doing, they've got like a great website, they've got a great product, they can absorb people in, basically have people binge on looking around their products for hours. They're doing something right. So, I think, like you're saying, it is really easy to say, well, people just aren't paying attention anymore. And it's like, well, but okay, people will pay attention and they'll pay attention for quite a while. They'll binge if they want to, but it's just got to be good enough. So it sounds like maybe we're getting a little bit comfortable with kind of blaming society and make excuses when really it's just like, well, people have short attention spans for crap stories, crap advertising, crap products. Like that
Yeah,
seems to be the problem within itself.
yeah, exactly. There's an old quote from an ad guy that I don't remember his name right now, but he said that people read what interests them. Sometimes it's an ad. So it's more important to be interesting and entertaining than it is to kind of craft an ad, so to speak. I know that sounds a little counterintuitive, but yeah, I think it's more a dearth of creativity and skill, I suppose, amongst marketers and advertisers than it is a lack of attention by the general public.
I like that. I think that quote is absolutely fitting. Again, I think we would love to lean on sort of blaming everyone else, but kind of just instead of like just pushing through the problem and finding the solution when there's a challenge. I think that gets a little bit easier for collective egos than just saying, okay, it's hard. Full stop.
Yeah.
I have to try a little harder than I thought here. Back on the social front, I did want to talk to you about this a bit more because, so many businesses at different sizes, they're all trying to navigate social media. It's a bit all over the place. We were talking a little bit about this relationship between, trying to be authentic, but in a way, not be fake, not say have fake mission statements or, fake resolve to do something in the world when really it's just like you're kind of out to sell the product. I think that's an interesting perspective. The other realm of kind of, I'd say, fakeness online seems to be there's an issue with getting real engagement. There's plenty of businesses that can fake engagement online, and there's bots and fake followers and all these things. And I think it's probably quite daunting to be a fairly emerging brand and look at, other brands around you who seem to have a lot of engagement or a lot of followers and be like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get through this? And I'm curious, maybe is that something that you run into sometimes with your brands, having to help them navigate that environment and figure out, okay, where's like the sweet spot for proper engagement, community building, or basically just navigating the challenges of kind of fakeness out in the space?
Yeah, it is a big challenge, especially when for smaller brands. I have a slightly hardline stance on this, which might upset some people, but I think that for the most part, organic social media is a waste of time for most small brands if you want to grow. And the reason is that you cannot reach enough people in order to make it effective or profitable for your business. I wrote a longer article that kind of goes into the math of why I think this is true. The basic gist of it is that if big brands get big by reaching as many people as they can consistently over a long period of time, then your focus as a small brand needs to be what we call market penetration. So reaching as many potential customers as you can. And when you focus on things like, organic followers and engagement, likes, you're not going to get there. And this is not just me kind of saying that and having a go at organic social. Facebook themselves have come out and said that engagement is a poor metric and should not be used if you're trying to grow a business. They had this great presentation. I don't know if it was leaked or they released it deliberately. It's on my website if people want to check it out. Facebook themselves ran the survey on their platform. They ran the numbers from ad campaigns running on Facebook. And their finding is that engagement has zero correlation to business results. What that means is that ads that get clicked more, ads that get commented or liked or viewed more if it's a video, has zero correlation with increases in sales or any other business metric that a company can have. I think it's a huge mistake. It's a waste of your time to focus on things like trying to get a lot of likes or get a lot of followers on social media. What you need to be doing is using paid advertising to reach as many potential customers as possible.
Okay. But let's talk more about that. That's what I'm curious to hear. It's like, okay, I'm hearing a solid case for what maybe you shouldn't be doing, especially in light of the fact that everyone's doing it, but it's not really working. But talk to me more about how people can use paid ads and just be successful, because I know that's not always easy within itself.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a biggie. So what should you do? There's two guiding principles that you can take if you're a small brand or even a big brand, actually. There's a really good piece of research from the IPA in the United Kingdom, and it was released by these two guys called Les Binet and Peter Field. And long story short, they looked at thousands and thousands of advertising campaigns over, I think it was a 6 year period or possibly more. And they found that there was, campaigns that were very successful for both small and large businesses had certain things in common. And one of the big things that they all had in common was that the company split their marketing budget between the two different types of advertising. So the optimal split for your advertising budget is to spend around 60% of your money on what we'll call brand building campaigns. So broad reaching campaigns with broader types of messages that are going after future customers, and 40% of your marketing budget existing or current customers who are in market. And usually, when you look at the types of tactics that are involved with each, the 40% of your budget going towards in market customers is usually best spent on digital because you have all the targeting capabilities. So you can actually find and target people who are in market if you advertise them on like Facebook or Google's ad network. And the larger spend, the 60% of your budget towards the brand campaigns, if you're a big brand, that's where you'd be spending the TV and the print and the out of home. But if you're a smaller brand and you can't afford those things, this is where you should be doubling down on online video and using platforms like Facebook, YouTube, and even TikTok to get those videos out to as many people as possible.
When you say online video, are you thinking of, you're saying like using TikTok and stuff there? Is it sort of creating just video via those social media platforms? Are you talking about video of like a more polished and professional, say, storytelling, like short docu sort of piece, for example? I'm just curious on like context there.
Yeah, no, that's a fair question. I think UGC has its place. So I think having kind of native advertising and content that looks maybe less professional and polished, I think that works really well when you're trying to make an immediate sale. I question whether that works as well when it comes to brand building. So if the point of building your brand or if the way to build your brand is to tell an interesting story related to your product or service, I feel like it can be hard to do that with UGC style ads. Doesn't mean you can't do it. I'm sure with the right creative and the right talent, you can make that happen. And if you can, then great. I'd say that's a great avenue to pursue. But typically, I think that you're going to need a bit more of a kind of planned and professional approach when creating this type of brand content, just to make sure that all the messages are getting across and that it actually looks like your brand. I think one of the major downfalls of UGC is that it usually doesn't contain your brand elements, which I know some people really like that. And they say, well, that's great. I don't want this to look like an ad. People don't like ads. Therefore, we should need to make this look like it's a real testimonial or it's somebody who's just, found our product and is talking about it naturally. However, if we go back to what we were talking about earlier, it's not that people don't like ads, it's that people don't like crappy ads. I think that, if you're able to create a good ad that's entertaining or interesting or relevant, you also want it to be branded because people need to know that it's you in order for the ad to be effective. If I show you an ad And you think, wow, that was great. Yeah, like I really like it. It was funny. It was cool. I loved it. And I said, great. Who was it for? And you can't tell me the company that the ad was for. You just wasted your money. So the more branded elements that you can add to an advertisement, in my opinion, the better.
Yeah, I appreciate that framework because I think a lot of small businesses, or pretty much every business, it's like they get told, do video. And then that's it. It's like video full stop. And it's like, all right, so my context for video is social. And I think, okay, if I just go in, I'm doing these reels or I'm doing this, and that, this is going to work. This is going to be a good video strategy. And then lo and behold, it's not it. So I can appreciate the use case scenarios that you've just laid out for when you should be using those social style videos and how to do so effectively when that polished professional piece might be more suitable. I think that's kind of what we need. It's a little bit more guidance in the space. It's like telling people exactly how they can get it done, or when they should be doing these certain things. And that's a kind of follow-up question I had for you, because you started saying like, okay, if you're a smaller business, get into video. We talked about the framework, but is there anything else for, small businesses? Let's say if they don't have the entire budget to hire on an agency or strategist yet to take charge of advertising, is there any other elements that they can put into place to still kind of fight their way up and be successful?
I hesitate to kind of like give specific advice just because I guess the boring answer is that it depends on your business.
And that's fair.
What I would say is that if you're a small brand trying to grow, think about how you can reach the most, like everybody in your total addressable market. So every potential customer, whether they're an existing customer or a future customer, think about how you can reach them as frequently as possible over the next 12 months. And then really prioritize your marketing spend and your marketing tactics based on that. And I would also say that prioritize reach over frequency. So sometimes when you work with agencies or digital agencies, they really like to retarget people many, many, many times because they're trying to get a sale. Again, that works if somebody's in market. If you know that someone's shopping for microphones and you're selling microphones, it does make sense to maybe try and show them an ad for microphones maybe 3 or 4 times. But we know that 95% of the people who are going to buy a microphone from you over the next 12 months are not currently shopping for a microphone. So instead of prioritizing frequency, like it doesn't make any sense to show them an ad 3 times because they're just not ready to buy yet. You want to go for reach. So you're really just trying to think like, look, over the next 12 months, I think the priority is to reach as many microphone shoppers over the next 12 months as possible and think about what type of marketing tactics and what type of content is going to help you do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I can appreciate the framework, right? Because it's easy to say, well, don't do this, but it's like, okay, well, obviously do this instead. And I think what you're talking about with reach there versus pummeling people with ads that just simply aren't ready. And it's something that I think not every business might understand, simply because their headspace is in, I'm just trying to sell my products, but I'm not necessarily adept in marketing or, even understanding the totality of my market. There's something in that. Now, granted, you obviously offer help to a bunch of different businesses, and I'm curious, like, what benefits you're trying to bring to the table with your agency to help elevate the brands that you work with.
Yeah, so we're trying to level the playing field. So we talked earlier about how there's this really unfair advantage that big brands have because they just have a lot more money to spend. So what we try and do is we level the playing field, and we think that all businesses should be able to have brand campaigns that are effective and profitable. So we want to help the businesses reach as many people as they can with a story or a campaign that's kind of interesting and funny, which is going to make them get chosen first when people are ready to buy. So we really focus on 3 different areas. First is positioning. We talked earlier about how it's really important to position yourself properly in the market so that you can talk about your products in a way that is interesting and engaging for people who aren't ready to buy them yet. We worked with the company on planning. So we will actually build out the business case for brand and give them a 12-month plan that tells them exactly what tactics that they need to use over the next 12 months, both brand and performance marketing, to make sure that they can grow profitably and not lose money when they're advertising. And the last thing we do is actually make the brand campaigns themselves. So if, we do want to have a campaign that is going to build our brand and speak to future customers, we work directly with companies on kind of coming up with a concept based on the positioning and then creating the ad campaign and delivering it.
Awesome. Well, in light of all the challenges that we've just spoken about throughout this episode and some of the things happening in the general industry today, I can see what you're offering is certainly helping quite a few businesses. I guess in the same vein of talking about what's going on in the industry, I'd love to look forward a bit. And I was curious, do you foresee anything changing in the coming years in terms of the marketing landscape? What's it going to take to stay ahead?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that we're in the early stages of probably the biggest change that's going to take place over the next 5 years, and that's all the privacy changes that are happening with Apple, even with Google right now. So the recent iOS update was huge, and it had a real impact on performance marketing, for the worse. And that wasn't performance marketing's fault. It was just that a lot of the targeting capabilities that we used to have on platforms like Facebook and Google are no longer going to be available to us, which means that performance marketing is not going to be as effective moving forward in the future. And I think that a lot of companies are going to have to start thinking differently about how they advertise and accept that they're going to have to be a little bit more creative and resourceful when it comes to targeting future customers, because their ability to go after the in-market customers is going to be not as good as it was in the past.
It's an interesting perspective. I guess it's always fun to ask people this question and figure out where do you think the industry is going, obviously based on the respective industries, but understanding how privacy changes would shift marketers and performance marketers is fascinating. Something that, probably is on many people's minds, but the general audience may not even have considered. So I appreciate that perspective. Well, it's been a lot of fun, and it's been cool to sort of dig into kind of different brand building elements, what's going on in the industry. I think we've got some nice golden nuggets here. I like to close out these episodes with just a couple rapid fire questions. If you're cool with that, I can kick off the first one.
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
Awesome. Okay. So the first one is, what are the best hidden growth opportunities within online marketing?
I'm going to say study the past. That's kind of a broad thing to say, but I think the biggest opportunities within marketing and advertising are hidden in the past. So, marketing has been around for more than 100 years. There are so many gems that are kind of hidden in our past in the form of old books, old manuals, old articles, which I think, or I feel that a lot of more digital marketers or online marketers aren't aware of, or they just ignore. And I think that's a huge mistake. If you want to get an edge with your own skills, or, build your company faster than it's currently being built, look to the past and kind of mine the wisdom and knowledge of people who came before us. So, like, one of the best books, for example, that I've read on direct sales was Scientific Advertising, written by a guy called Claude Hopkins in 1920, maybe. It's free. You can download it online. You don't have to pay for it. It's not very long. And the language is a little bit dated, obviously, because it was written so long ago, but the insights in there are fantastic. And it tells you more about direct sales than any blog post that I've read recently. So I think mind the past.
I love that. Yeah, that's fantastic advice. Well, it kind of bleeds into my next question, because I want to talk to you about tools or resources that can help people when it comes to optimizing their own marketing.
Yeah, well, so let's carry on the theme then. So, what old books or resources do I think could be good for people to read? I think Ogilvy on advertising is a classic. David Ogilvy was a famous ad man from the 60s, 70s, 80s. His book is a great resource to understand how to create better advertising. I think that there's a free PDF floating around the internet. I forget the name exactly, which is not very helpful, but I think it was called the J. Walter Thompson Planning book. It was written by a guy called Stephen King. It's a masterclass in brand planning. So if you are trying to figure out how do I think about brand, how do I think about strategy, and how do I position myself in the market, I highly recommend you go read that book. And the last book I would read on strategy is Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. It's not an old book, but it's one of the best reads that I've come across to help people understand what is a good strategy and what is a bad strategy. And it has lots of really good real life examples in there as well.
Awesome. No, it's great. I love it. We've got a little book list going here. Do your best to link to those in the show notes. Final question. What has been your funniest moment while working in the realm of marketing?
I don't know if it was a little bit funny, but also like a little bit scary. So in one of my old jobs at a nonprofit, I wrote the newsletter. Like I really like copywriting. And like I said, I've read, Claude Hopkins' books and many other old books on copywriting. And they always say that you need to try and write to one person specifically. So like the newsletter should read like it's the person speaking directly to you. And I think I took that to heart and I was sending out these emails to the newsletter subscribers. And this guy was furious. It was all about like how to find a better job. I was working for a nonprofit that helped people find jobs. So I was like job tips and interview tips and so on. And this guy was so furious, he called me up and he's like, this is like, I don't need this information. Like, I didn't go through these steps. This is not relevant for me. And I was like, whoa, oh my God, dude, I'm sorry. Like, on the one hand, I patted myself on the back because he obviously thought that I was writing directly to him. Like, it was personal advice. So I was like, well, good job, Ian. Like, you've done that. But on the other hand, it was like making him furious. And he was like trying to get me fired because he was just so angry that I was sending him this advice that he didn't appreciate. So,
Wow. Talk about
yeah,
newsletter conversion.
I know.
That is next level. Interesting that he really took it so personally. Maybe he had some other stuff going on there that he couldn't really see the forest of the trees. But oh, that's super funny that happened to you. And I'm sure would give plenty of people a chuckle. If anything, they're like, gosh, I need to learn how to write directly to people. So much so that they'll call me really believing it. Well, that's very cool. Ian, it's been great to have you on and to hear all about your outlook on, marketing and branding. I just wanted to put it out there. Where can people reach you if they want to get in touch with you and hear more?
I would say check out our website, creativebusinesscompany.com. And if you'd like to dive deeper into any of the topics that we've talked about, we have 2 white papers on the website that really go in depth into all the topics that we talked about. We have a white paper called How to Build a Big Brand on a Small Budget, which has a lot more data and case studies and sort of practical advice on how to build brand campaigns that convert. And we just released a second white paper called How Challengers Can Position for Growth. And that's really explores how smaller brands can position themselves in a way that's unique and memorable. So creativebusinesscompany.com/thinking. You can download both of those papers for free.
Very cool. Thank you. And thank you for making that available to people. I'm excited to see what people are able to take away from those things. So thank you again for giving us your time and coming on to the show today. Looking forward to seeing what you publish in the space in the time to come, especially on all the crazy stuff unfolding in marketing today.
Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Sarah.
Thank you. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. I hope you've walked away with a bit of new insight that'll help you in your digital entrepreneurship journey. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To learn more about businesses available for sale at Empire Flippers, click the link in the description or visit empireflippers.com/marketplace. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.